Charles Whitmore sat alone in his sprawling glass-walled office, high above the humming city. The skyline blinked with 1,000 lights, but his own reflection in the window held his gaze captive. Creased forehead, tired eyes, a tailored suit that fit his body, but no longer his mind. Behind him, a glowing hologram projected the week's analytics. Stock prices up, market share up, customer engagement up. But none of it settled the unease in his chest. The numbers looked good, better than good, actually. Velisyn Technologies was, by every public metric, a modern success story. Innovative products, lightning speed growth, a brand synonymous with progress. Yet, just days ago, a confidential report had landed on Charles's desk like a thunderclap. Rising attrition, sharp declines in team morale, a 20% drop in internal trust scores. The word toxic had surfaced more than once in anonymous feedback. He had read it all in silence, each paragraph slicing through the illusion he had proudly curated. This wasn't just a rough quarter. Something fundamental was slipping beneath the surface. The door opened with a quiet click, and Vanessa stepped in. Chief of staff for the last 6 years, razor sharp, dependable, unafraid to speak truth. She approached with her tablet, carefully composed as always. "We've prepared a proposal," she said, tapping the screen. "HR wants to expand the wellness program, add new mental health days, offer offsites for team bonding." "No," Charles said, cutting her off gently but firmly. "That's not it." Vanessa blinked. "I'm sorry?" Charles swiveled in his chair, eyes drifting back toward the window. "That's treating the fever, not the infection." Vanessa stepped closer, her tone softening. "Charles, you've always said the culture is our backbone. If something's wrong, we need to act." He looked at her, really looked this time. "That's just it, Vanessa. I don't think I know this company anymore. Not the real one. I see reports, charts, filtered memos, but I don't see what people are living every day." She raised a brow. "So what are you saying?" He hesitated. Then it came, quiet but sharp. "I need to go inside, not as CEO, as someone no one notices." Vanessa stared, her breath caught. "You're not serious." "I'm completely serious," he said. "I want to see it all without the spotlight. The whispers in the hallways, the coffee break complaints, the true heartbeat of this place." She folded her arms. "You want to become a ghost in your own company." He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he opened a drawer and pulled out a photograph of an old mentor from his earliest startup days. Gray-haired and bright-eyed, who once told him, "Real leadership starts where titles disappear." "I think I've forgotten what it means to really lead," Charles whispered. By the following week, arrangements were quietly made through a third-party janitorial service Velisyn contracted. A fake identity, a modest work history, a fabricated resume for Chuck Weston, 52, recently laid off, looking for a fresh start. The night before his first shift, Charles stood in his bedroom, staring at himself in the mirror. The man in front of him wore cheap canvas pants, a faded blue shirt with maintenance stitched on the chest, and scuffed sneakers. No Rolex, no sleek phone, no authority in his voice. Lisa, his wife, leaned in the doorway, arms crossed, concern clear in her eyes. "You're really going through with this?" "I have to," he said. "If I'm wrong, I need to know. If I'm right." He paused. "Then we have a much bigger problem than quarterly performance." She stepped forward, kissed his cheek, and handed him a simple lunch wrapped in foil. "Then go find the truth, Chuck." The next morning, long before sunrise, Charles parked at the far end of Velisyn's campus, not in his executive space, but near the loading dock. The building loomed ahead, familiar and foreign all at once. He pulled the baseball cap lower over his brow, slung the janitor's bag over his shoulder, and walked past the gates. Security barely glanced at him. Maintenance, right? Basements through the freight elevator, as the heavy doors groaned shut behind him and the elevator rattled downward. Charles stood in silence, staring at the chipped metal floor. This was it. No name on the wall, no assistants, no one waiting to open the door. For the first time in 20 years, Charles Whitmore entered Velisyn as no one important. And that's when he realized he was about to learn who really was. The basement level of Velisyn Technologies felt like a different universe, one Charles had never stepped into. The walls were lined with scratched supply cabinets and flickering fluorescent lights that buzzed like a warning he didn't yet understand. The air smelled faintly of ammonia and defeat, It wasn't dirty, but it wasn't cared for, either. A stout woman in her 50s with short, steel-colored hair and a Boston Red Sox cap looked up as Charles walked in. "You must be the new guy," she said, eyeing him like she could smell pretense. "Chuck?" Charles nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Chuck Weston, ma'am." She smirked. "Call me Janice. No ma'am crap down here. You're just in time for the morning brief." She didn't wait for him to respond. She turned and walked briskly down a hallway that felt more like a forgotten school corridor, that part of one of Silicon Valley's most prestigious buildings. He followed silently, trying to adjust the weight of the janitor's belt clipped awkwardly to his waist. A spray bottle clinked against his hip. They entered a small room with a stained whiteboard and 3 folding chairs. 2 men were sipping coffee from styrofoam cups, their uniforms worn and patched. They looked up, nodded. "Chuck, this here's Ramon and Theo," Janice said. "We do a rotation schedule. You'll be with me today." Lobby and executive floors. The word executive landed differently. Charles knew exactly who was up there. His own office. Vanessa's team. The managers who'd memorized their KPs but forgotten people's names. As the morning briefing wrapped, Charles learned 3 rules. Move fast, speak little, and be invisible. By 8 a.m., Chuck was pushing the creaky cleaning cart toward the north lobby. The lobby's marble floors gleamed under sunlight streaming through 2-story windows. Employees floated wearing noise-canceling headphones, press suits, designer dresses. Most didn't glance at him. The few that did offered a half smile and kept walking. It wasn't until 8:37 a.m. that someone actually spoke to him. "Excuse me," a sharp voice called. A woman in sleek heels and a black blazer pointed toward the elevators. "There's a spill over there. Nearly slipped on it. Please take care of that." Charles walked over, mop in hand, and paused as she tapped away on her phone. She didn't even wait to see him clean it. Didn't say thank you. She was gone before he even started. No one knew he was their CEO. No one saw him, and that was exactly the point. By noon, he had made his way to the main cafeteria, wiping down tables. He tuned into low murmurs and clinking plates. The cafeteria buzzed with casual conversations, gossip disguised as strategy talk. Charles wiped around a group of marketing associates huddled in a corner booth. "I swear, the only people who get promoted are the ones who suck up to Vanessa," one woman said, stabbing her salad with frustration, "or look like they belong." In a TED Talk, a man added, "I mean, remember Carla? She was brilliant, but she dressed like a high school chemistry teacher." Gone. Charles's stomach twisted. Carla had once pitched one of the company's most forward-thinking accessibility designs. He remembered approving her concept personally, then never hearing her name again. He continued down the aisle. At the next table, a group of engineers laughed loudly. HR's latest survey. "What a joke. Like they care," someone said. "I told the truth on it once and got benched for 3 weeks." Charles tightened his grip on the rag in his hand. These weren't flukes. This wasn't just one sour voice. This was a pattern. A culture he hadn't just missed but possibly created. At 1:15 p.m. As he cleaned up after the lunch rush, he heard a sound he hadn't expected, a soft sniffle. Tucked into the farthest corner of the room was a young woman, her tray untouched, head bent over her phone, shoulders shaking. Charles approached quietly. "Mind if I wipe the table?" he asked, voice low. She wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a small laugh. "Oh, no. Go ahead. Sorry. I just a rough day." Charles nodded, not prying, but her sadness stayed with him long after the table was cleaned. By late afternoon, Charles was assigned to clean a few executive conference rooms. He moved with care, hoping no one from upper management would recognize him, but the makeup, beard, stubble, and posture shift worked. Not a single glance lingered. He entered a familiar glass-walled conference room. It was his favorite, a panoramic view, a polished table, and a bowl of hand-picked snacks. As he dusted around the edge of the chairs, voices echoed from the next room. He paused, leaning toward the partially open door. "I don't care if she's been here 10 years, a woman snapped. "She's not client-facing. I need someone photogenic for this pitch, not vanilla." It was Evelyn, VP of Strategic Partnerships. A man replied, cautious, "But her numbers are stellar, and she knows the project backwards. She doesn't have the vibe, okay?" Evelyn hissed. "It's about the image people need to feel. Like we're cutting edge, not out of touch." The man said nothing. Charles's blood turned cold. He had mentored Evelyn once, had spoken proudly of her rise to leadership. Now he listened as she crushed someone's future with a sentence about their appearance. His chest tightened with rage, but he couldn't move. Not yet. He stayed late. That evening, long after most had gone home, in the quiet hum of nighttime lights, he sat on an empty bench outside the data lab, hands folded, thoughts racing. So this was the truth beneath the glass of steel. Not innovation, not community, not progress. Image, fear, silence. He pulled out the small notebook hidden in his cleaning bag, opened it to the first page, wrote in firm, slow handwriting, DAY. 1. They don't see me, and I don't see them either, not who they really are. Then underlined it twice, because tomorrow, he would go deeper, and he would not look away. The third morning didn't start with sunlight. It started with rain. Fat drops fell against Charles's windshield as he sat parked in the far corner of Velisyn's lot, watching employees rush through the glass entrance beneath umbrellas and briefcases, laughing about traffic and deadlines and espresso orders. He gripped the wheel, unsure why he felt so hollow. Maybe it was the way the building loomed now, not like a place he owned, but like a world he no longer understood. He stepped into the rain. No umbrella, just his janitor's badge and a coffee-stained shirt he had picked up at a thrift store. The wind bit at his neck. Fitting. The company always felt colder on the inside. The assignment board today had a red mark beside his name. Shift adjustment. Shadow Ramon. Sector C. Product development. QA. Legal. Charles didn't know why that small change made his chest tighten, but something about it felt off. Ramon didn't speak much. Tall, quiet, moved fast, smelled faintly of bleach and menthol. He handed Charles a pair of gloves and tossed him a stained blue rag. Keep your head down. Don't ask too many questions. This wing, different rules. As they passed through double doors marked authorized, staff only, Charles noticed the surveillance cameras, more than usual, tucked into corners, hidden in vents, watching. Why so much security? Charles asked. Ramon shot him a look. You don't ask that in Sector C. The product development wing was sleek, modern, minimalist desks without clutter, whiteboards with formulas that looked like magic to the untrained eye. But Charles noticed something else. Silence. Not focused silence. Tense silence. Eyes darted. Conversation stopped mid-sentence when anyone unfamiliar entered the room. Employees wore their badges like armor and whispered like prisoners in a monitored room. Near the back corner, Charles spotted a man sitting cross-legged under his desk, typing fast. He kept working as Charles and Ramon cleaned around him. That's Raj, Ramon said under his breath. Brilliant. Speaks 5 languages. Designed the first-gen voice module. But what? He doesn't fit. Ramon said simply, too old, too quiet, too brown. Charles felt the sentence land like a hammer. They moved on. Near QA, they passed the glass-walled meeting room. Inside were 5 people and one oversized screen showing code, projections, timelines. A woman with fire in her eyes stood at the center. Danielle, the head of quality assurance. I don't care if Raj's model works better, she snapped. He can't present it. We need someone that looks like leadership material. Someone murmured. Should we call in Chris? Danielle nodded. He's got the jawline and the MBA. The rest will fake. It's about presence, not precision. Charles's stomach twisted. The hallway lights flickered as if they, too, were ashamed. Later, in legal, things took an even darker turn. While cleaning the kitchenette, Charles overheard hushed voices behind a closed door. 2 men arguing. We can't bury this audit, one said. If someone finds out, no one's going to find out. The CEO doesn't even read the red level alerts unless Vanessa prints them out. Charles froze. Keep it clean. Shift the language. Investigative delay instead of potential fraud. Understood. Charles couldn't see their faces, but he memorized the cadence, the tone. One of them wore a wedding ring. The other cracked his knuckles every few words. Ramon nudged him hard. We need to go. They moved on, but the air felt different now, heavier, like gravity had changed. In the loading dock hallway, Charles stopped to catch his breath. That's when he noticed something even more jarring. A bulletin board, tucked between a vending machine and a coat rack. It wasn't visible from the main hallway. No cameras nearby, just a pinboard filled with handwritten notes, crinkled, folded, and tacked without symmetry. The board was titled, Whispers. Charles leaned closer. 3 years. No promotion, still training the men they hire above me. HR said speak up, but then I got reassigned to night shift. I miss my daughter's school plays. My manager calls it a lack of commitment. Why do our ideas die in the rooms we're not invited into? Each note was unsigned. Each note a wound. Quiet rebellion stapled to a corkboard no one admitted existed. Charles stared at it until Ramon returned. You're not supposed to read those, Ramon muttered. Just let him blow in the wind. That night, Charles didn't go straight. Home. He drove to the marina, parked by the water, and screamed into the silence of his car. He thought of Raj, silenced by prejudice, of Danielle, weaponizing image over substance, of the whispers on the board, the hidden grief, the ignored excellence, the punished honesty. He had once said in an interview, our company runs on talent, not politics, on passion, not pedigree. Lies. The engine was rotting beneath the hood. He sat in the dark and wrote in his notebook. They bury brilliance and reward obedience. They filter ideas through face and family tree. If I had applied here now, I wouldn't even get an interview. He closed the notebook. Tomorrow, he would visit Radat not as CEO, but as Chuck the janitor. And he wouldn't ask for forms. He'd ask for truth. The morning began with fog thick enough to blur even the sharpest memories. Charles parked as usual at the far end of Velisyn's campus, but something in his gut felt different, tighter, like a string being wound one turn too many. The notebook in his pocket was heavier now, not from pages, but from truth. He wasn't just observing anymore. He was collecting evidence, patterns, names, systems. This wasn't a culture problem. It was a machine, and somewhere deep inside, someone had designed it that way. Today, his assignment was in human resources, a name that once sounded to him like safety, fairness, support. But after what he'd seen, he wasn't sure whether HR at Velisyn was a healing hand or a velvet noose. The HR floor was quieter than most. Sleek, soft lighting, walls covered in abstract art and words like empathy, transparency, unity. Charles could almost taste the irony. Janice gave him the instructions. With a glance that lingered along, careful in there, she muttered under her breath, they don't like things being swept clean. Charles raised an eyebrow. She didn't elaborate. Inside, everything gleamed. The air smelled faintly of lavender and fresh ink. A receptionist with perfect posture glanced up from her keyboard. You're the cleaner today? Yes, ma'am. Chuck. She gave a polite smile that didn't touch her eyes. Don't touch any of the personnel files, and keep clear of room 3C between 10 and 11. It's booked for a disciplinary. Charles nodded, tucked that detail away, and got to work, but his eyes scanned more than surfaces. He made his way down the hall, pretending to check trash bins, but noting every room label, every whiteboard scribble, every coffee mug with titles. At 10:04 a.m., he was near room 3C when he heard it. Muffled voices, raised, then sharp silence. Then a woman's voice barely above a whisper. I reported him, and now you're demoting me. Another voicemail. Calm. Corporate. Train. Double quotes. No, Ava. We're simply realigning resources. This isn't retaliation. But you must understand the impact of your decisions on your department's morale. Sometimes, silence is strength. Charles froze. Silence is strength. He leaned slightly toward the door. The walls here were thinner than they looked. You're protecting him, Eva said, now trembling. He's a director. I'm replaceable. That's what this is. The male voice sighed. That's an emotional interpretation. You're welcome to file an appeal, though it will go through this office again. Charles's heart pounded. He stepped back as footsteps approached. The door opened. A woman in her late 30s exited quickly, wiping her cheeks. Her badge said, Eva Kaplan, Senior UX. Her eyes met his, just for a second, and in that second, she saw him. Not Chuck, but someone who knew. He gave the smallest nod. She blinked, swallowed, then walked away without a word. Later that afternoon, while cleaning, a side hallway near the HR archive room, Charles found a shred of paper caught beneath a file cabinet. Something made him pick it up. It was a printed HR complaint form. Crumpled. Dated 2 months ago. Filed by Eva Kaplan. Subject, inappropriate conduct, retaliation, power imbalance. Scrawled across the top in red ink. Addressed internally. No. Further action. Charles's jaw clenched. It wasn't just that the system was broken. It was that it was self-cleaning like a crime scene, sanitized before the body was even cold. Just then, footsteps echoed down the hall. Fast. Two men in security uniforms rounded the corner. Speaking low, Vanessa wants us to check the janitorial logs. Someone's been seen near restricted floors multiple times. Charles ducked into a side supply closet, heart pounding. They passed without noticing, but the message was clear. Someone was watching. Back in the janitor's quarters, Charles scribbled furiously into his notebook. HR protects power, not people. Complaints disappear. Whistleblowers punished. The system eats its own. And now it smells me. That night, Charles didn't go home. He drove to a diner 3 towns over, ordered eggs he didn't touch, stared at the reflection in the window. A man who used to run a company he didn't recognize anymore. He thought about Eva Dodd, about Raj Dodd, about the Whispers board. Then he remembered something his mentor once told him over whiskey and firelight. The greatest threat to any kingdom is not the enemy at the gates. It's the lie in the mirror. Charles closed his eyes. He had become that lie. Tomorrow would be different. He wouldn't just clean. He would confront, even if it meant burning the palace down. The storm didn't wait for morning. It came in the middle of the night, thunder rolling over the hills like ancient drums, rain slamming rooftops like it was trying to wake something. Charles sat on the floor of his study, back against the wall, his notebook in his lap, too tired to sleep, too restless to stop. He'd written 47 pages. None of them were strategy. They were stories, each one a bruise on a company he built. For 12 a.m. He made the decision. Today, he wouldn't just listen. He would test the machine. By 6 a.m., he was in the building wearing his janitor uniform, like armor, on the clipboard. His assignment was simple: disinfect all conference rooms on the innovation floor. But Charles had a different mission. He stopped by the server closet on his way to the elevator. He'd remembered a trick from his early coding days, one the security team hadn't patched. A quick bypass on a secondary tablet would give him access to the building's non-confidential internal messaging, just enough to listen. 30 seconds later, a screen blinked alive, and what he saw turned his stomach. A chat thread between 2 middle managers. MM1, did you hear? HR flagged someone for accessing restricted floors. Janitorial crew might have a mole. MM2, figures. Were they visible lately? I say we start quiet shifting anyone asking too many questions. MM1, already started. That intern in QA, gone. Eva's been reassigned to a satellite office. In Utah, Charles's hand trembled. It wasn't just a culture of silence. It was a culture of enforced forgetting, and they were scrubbing away truth like a dirty tile floor. He logged out, wiped the tablet, and started cleaning. But this time, he didn't move quietly. He started on the executive floor just before the board arrived for a meeting. Charles positioned himself near the hallway outside the boardroom. He knew the flow, knew the schedule. He was counting on it. One by one. He watched them filing, polished, powerful, oblivious. He mopped slowly, deliberately, listening. Inside, through the heavy doors, he could hear the muffled voice of the coup. Employee satisfaction metrics are back up. HR says the new wellness check-ins are reducing internal complaints. Charles's grip tightened on the mop handle. Wellness check-ins. He knew what that really meant now. Interviews designed to root out dissent before it bloomed. They're smiling in public again. Another voice added. We're stabilizing. But outside those doors, Charles had seen too much, and he was done pretending. As the meeting began, he slid a small envelope beneath the door. Inside was a printed list. 6 names. Employees who had filed HR complaints and were reassigned, demoted, or quietly let go. Attached, timestamps, anonymized quotes from the Whispers board, and a simple post-it note. Your culture is eating your talent. Signed, someone who cared enough to look. Then he walked away. By noon, the entire executive hallway buzzed like a hornet's nest. Whispers, tension, a sense that someone had fired a silent gun in a soundproof room. Charles didn't stay to enjoy it. He had one more stop. The sub-basement, the place no one talked about unless they worked in facilities. It was where unused equipment went to rot, where forgotten employees worked odd hours and were paid in silence. Janice had warned him once, that floor, that's where hope goes to die. But when Charles stepped off the elevator, he found something else. A circle of folding chairs, a coffee pot, and a dozen employee support staff, car rejects. Former engineers now stuck in logistics. In the middle, Henry, the IT angel from earlier days. And next to him, Grace, the quiet designer no one had time for. They were holding something. that looked like a support group, but it wasn't about grief. It was about rebellion. Not loud, not dangerous, but real. So if we route our ideas through the mentorship track, Henry was saying, they can't reject them without cause. We make it official. Document everything. Force transparency one form at a time. And if someone gets flagged, Grace asked. Henry held up a folder. We make copies. Send them out of system. I have backups. Charles stood frozen at the edge of the light. They were building something down here. A counterweight. A resistance. Henry looked up. Their eyes met. He didn't recognize Charles, but he saw something in him. Need a seat? Henry asked. Charles nodded slowly. Yeah, I do. He sat down, listened, and for the first time in weeks, he felt something move in his chest. Hope. Not the corporate kind. The human kind. After the session ended, Charles stayed behind to help fold chairs. Grace approached. Shyly. You don't talk much, she said. I used to, Charles replied. She tilted her head. You sound like someone who used to be important. He looked at her, really looked. I used to think I was, he said. Now I think I'm just late. She smiled. Late's better than never. As he left the basement, Charles knew what had to come next. He couldn't stay undercover forever. But he could do one final thing as Chuck. He could light the match, and when the whole system asked who started the fire, he'd be ready to step forward, not as a janitor, not as a ghost, but as a leader who finally remembered what that word meant. Tomorrow, he would reveal everything, and the truth would no longer hide in the dark. The day of reckoning didn't begin with a speech, it began with silence. Not the passive kind, the kind that hums before a lightning strike. Charles stood in front of Velisyn's towering lobby windows, watching the sunrise slice gold into the glass. He was wearing neither the CEO's tailored suit nor the janitor's uniform. Just a simple gray shirt. No badge, no armor, just the truth. He had called an emergency company-wide town hall at 9 a.m. Every employee, every level, no excuses. The subject line had read simply, truth. Vanessa had texted him twice. Legal had mailed a warning. Pierre was already drafting statements. He ignored them all. At 9:02 a.m., the auditorium lights dimmed, rows filled with confused employees, some whispering, some anxious. The executives sat near the front, brows furrowed, exchanging glances. Most hadn't seen Charles in over a week. When the stage light came on, gasps echoed through the room. Charles stepped forward, carrying a janitor's mop in one hand and a manila folder in the other. Good morning, he began, his voice calm, but stripped bare of pretense. I know many of you are wondering why we're here, why this meeting was called without notice, why I look like this. Nervous laughter in the back. He held up the mop. This, for the last 2 weeks, was my job. Silence deepened. I became someone else. Chuck, the janitor. I cleaned your floors, wiped your tables, walked your halls invisible, and what I saw, his voice cracked, left me speechless. He paced the stage slowly, each step measured. I heard designers dismissed because they weren't loud enough. Developers ignored because of their accents. Engineers mocked for their age. I saw talent hidden behind race, gender, and fear. I read the whispers board. I watched HR bury complaints in red ink. I watched you smile through rot. I watched some of you cause it. The crowd was frozen. I became invisible to see what power refuses to admit that we're broken. He opened the folder. Inside were printouts, HR reports, audit suppressions, demotion letters, snapshots from the whispers board. Charles turned to the executive section. Linda, Mark, Danielle, Evelyn, I'm speaking to you now not as your superior, but as your mirror. Evelyn's eyes widened. Mark shifted uncomfortably. You fed a system that rewarded image over impact. You buried mistakes with realignments. You let brilliant minds leave while you kept people who looked good. In meetings, I gave you this kingdom, and you built a castle on sand. Linda rose, flustered. Charles, with all due respect, sit down. The firmness of his tone startled the room into silence again. This isn't a trial, he said. This is a confession, and I'm not just accusing you. I'm accusing myself. His voice dropped to a whisper. I forgot what leadership meant. He looked out over the entire auditorium. Leadership isn't making the right calls in boardrooms. It's listening in break rooms. It's not delivering keynotes, it's delivering people. I created this company for innovation, but I starved its heart. He turned to the screen behind him. A photo appeared. Henry, helping an intern. Then Angela, asleep at her desk beside a mountain of reports. Then Grace, picking up her scattered drawings. Then Raj, alone at his desk. Then Ava, crying in a hallway. Then the whispers board zoomed in so their words filled the screen. I matter, but no one knows my name. This place could be great if someone just looked. Then, finally Charles, as Chuck, pushing his cart down a hallway of glass offices. He turned back to his people. I looked, and now we rebuild. Murmurs swept the room, eyes welled with tears. Some executives slouched in shame. Some employees leaned forward, hearts cracking open. Charles laid out the reform, a whistleblower protection council led by cross-level employees. A cultural reset, mandatory training not on compliance but on compassion. Rotational shadowing every manager to work 1 week per year in non-leadership roles. A re-evaluation of all terminated employees in the last 24 months, beginning with Ava and Raj, merit-based promotion reassessment. Dismantling an elite pipeline that funneled talent based on alma maters or appearances. And starting today, he said quietly, I stepped down from daily CEO operations, not because I'm leaving, but because I need to learn to lead again. Gasps. Angela will be interim chief of operations. He continued. Henry will head our employee task force. Grace will lead our design mentorship program. And Raj, Charles smiled, a tear escaping. Raj is coming back, and this time, he'll present his work himself. Then he set the mop down on the center of the stage. This mop taught me more about humanity than any investor meeting ever did. And from this day forward, it stays in my office. Double quotes applause. But not a polite one, not manufactured. It started in the back. Then the sides. Then the front. Then the entire auditorium stood. And they roared. Not for the CEO, but for the janitor who reminded them what a company could be. Charles stepped off the stage into a sea of tears, hugs, and shocked faces. He found Ava, took her hand. We're going to fix this. You deserve better. She nodded, speechless. He found Henry. Still want to build something bigger? Henry smiled. Now I know it's possible. Angela approached. Charles, you didn't just break the mirror. I saw the cracks, and I chose to bleed anyway. That night, Velisyn felt different. Lights were still on, but this time, they weren't hiding shadows. In Charles's office, the mop leaned against the wall. No plaques. No trophies. Just a handwritten sign taped to the desk. Leadership equals service. And below it the folded uniform of Chuck the janitor. Velisyn had a long road ahead, but for the first time, it wasn't walking blind. It was walking together. And somewhere in the night, Charles finally slept, not as a CEO weighed down by profit margins, but as a man lifted by purpose.